Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From ignorance, lead me to the truth. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Hi, Aditya. Sindhuja here.
Morning, Sindhuja.
I have a question. It's not so much a question, just a kind of confirmation I want. So, since we are talking about action, right? Work and action, I feel like there's something inherently about action that is very sticky, for lack of a better word. By sticky, I mean we are always like bound to it. So, even if I'm not wanting the fruits of action, there's something about action itself that always wants us to do more. Like we are just always wanting growth. Like if I'm doing something today, I want to do it better, or I want to learn more about it, right? Just for the nature of action, not even for the rewards it brings. But it's still always keeping us like wanting more in a very subtle level. So like and I feel like it's wrong to resist it, because this is how we contribute more to the world, right? But is there like some point where there will be absolute contentment where we don't even want more in terms of the action we do?
Thanks, Sindhuja. Probably a very beautiful question as a prelude to chapter 5. The quick answer is yes. There can be a state where you don't depend on action for contentment, but action proceeds on by itself. Your body does what the body does. There is a quote, I think, in medieval Europe, which I'm definitely misquoting, which is, give unto Caesar what you give unto Caesar, give unto God what you give unto God. Meaning, treat Caesar as Caesar, treat God as God. I'm certainly misquoting it. That's what we need to do to our system as well. The body needs to do what the body needs to do. The body is an equipment that requires certain actions to function. The mind is a warehouse repository of imprints that requires expressions to function. The intellect is a muscle that keeps discriminating, discerning, that requires certain actions to function. But I can be observing this without getting caught up personalizing those actions. Actions will continue. As Krishna says in chapter 3, who can Arjuna not act? I mean, the moment the world is in dimensions of time, space, causation, everything is moving on, isn't it? So actions are a product of being in time, space, and causation. You fold back any one of these constructs, and there is no action. Even a yogi has to eat, isn't it? Even a yogi has to go to the bathroom. Even the yogi has to, at a body level, the body functions through its own pranas, through its own. Even yogi needs to breathe, isn't it? Controlling breath doesn't mean stopping to breathe. Then anybody dies, whether or not you're self-realized. Actions will happen automatically. If we are dead inside in a positive way, not in a bad way. Meaning if we are not attached to any of these levels and have pegged ourselves into our true nature, then you constantly become a sakshi to these actions. You're neither fighting these actions, nor are you calling upon more actions. You let the actions continue. That's the highest form of delegation, actually. The body does what the body does, the mind does what the mind does, the intellect does what the intellect does. You are in control of all of this, but you are apart from all of this. So you're not personalizing at the wrong levels. This is mine, but I'm not this. Nobody in our right mind would not say the car is mine. Of course, the car is mine. But nobody would say, I am the car. Everybody would say, this is my jacket. But nobody would say, I am the jacket. And there's a very insignificant point, seemingly, because when you talk about the car or jacket, it is but self-evident and obvious. It is also self-evident and obvious when we talk about the body, mind, intellect. These are our possessions. But am I just this, or am I a witness of this? If you observe carefully, if you concentrate carefully, the penny can drop. It is all the power of our listening. In Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, the Shravana is so important because that is where the concentration of listening comes into picture. I'll come into this in a second, but yeah, Sindhuja, absolutely. Absolutely. We are propelled to action, and action alone provides results. Results don't come without action. But can we channelize our action towards what is enabling us as compared to channelize our action towards what's hindering us? What does an intellect do? It is able to discern prior to action whether it is short-term gain in sacrifice of long-term joy, or whether it's short-term sorrow in sacrifice of long-term gain. And there is no right answer to this. But an intellect can channelize action in a way that you are even maximizing, even a selfish person, even if we are a selfish person with an intellect strong enough, we should be able to maximize our gain, isn't it? How much of our action and desires are truly maximizing even our personal gain? Definitely stress is not, depression is not. The results of those reinforced actions lead us to sadness, stress, dejection. For those who are actions reinforced in the past by us, that's our temperament, that's our mind that we have created. Because mind almost always forces us to immediate gratification. And discernment comes where we choose between short-term and long-term. And almost always what the intellect knows is opposite to what the mind seems to want. Because the intellect is able to do a very objective analysis of, do you want short-term gain in sacrifice of a longer duration pleasure? Or do you want a short-term sorrow, which the mind starts fighting against, as compared to long-term joy? So in this perennial battle of mind versus intellect, which is what is depicted in art throughout centuries. You look at some of Michelangelo's paintings, if you look at the famous David versus Goliath, if you look at some of the representations in our own culture, it is all a battle between mind and intellect, and the choice of gratification versus the choice of conscious decision. And therefore, yes, absolutely, we are propelled to action. But are we allowing action to help ourselves in the path of Shreyas? Are we allowing actions to continue ourselves in that cyclical loop of our own personality? My mom is here on the call, and my mom and I often joke that people don't change. Don't we, Mom? People don't change. So
yes, that is definitely a thought.
that's definitely a thought. Yeah, my mom is always diplomatic in these answers. That's definitely a thought. Yeah, but what do we mean by that, Mom? When we jokingly say, of course, we don't mean it 100%. What do we mean by people don't change?
Well, I think the core remains, and if we have to speak in the parlance of the Gita, also there is a direct answer about the Prakriti and the Gunas and etc. that we've been discussing. No, it's stemming right from the Vasanas and the cyclical thing. Yes, one has to go beyond that. It requires that effort, that probably, going beyond the Sattvic, But by default, people will not change.
Yeah, but exactly. There's a default and design, isn't it? By
Yes,
default,
yes, absolutely.
but see, default always requires intervention, isn't it?
Yes,
Unattended to, default continues, isn't it?
absolutely.
Default not only continues, it keeps modifying, most often enhancing what already was. And therefore, we're all compelled to action. But unmonitored action, only default leads to default and greater default, basically, by default, I mean, not default in terms of financial terms. So that's why we need to monitor action. But monitored action doesn't mean inaction. It is also action, but it is action that leads to more fulfillment. And that's why Krishna, we will see, declares early in chapter 5 that Arjuna, finally, I've been beating around the bush for the last few chapters. Are you asking me the same question again? Which is better, Krishna, yoga of action, karma yoga, or yoga of knowledge, Sankhya yoga? Krishna says yoga of action is better, is superior, in fact, he says. Why? Because it's easier. Jnana yoga is tacit knowledge, passive knowledge. It's a paroksha for us now. Till it becomes aparoksha, go act. Krishna says, go do your duties. But do it with that intellect, with that humility towards what you don't understand. You don't need to understand the self. It's incomprehensible. But just because you don't understand the self doesn't mean that you can't assign a proxy to it called that all-powerful, which I don't understand. But let me not make that all-powerful me, my ego. And therefore, let me act on as a surrender, sacrifice, yajna to something beyond me. That's the only concept of God. It's a scaffolding in Vedanta. Is God, do we discuss God in Vedanta? Yes. Is there God in Vedanta? No. But let's not dismiss it too simply, unless you're a jnana yogi. Therefore, act with that calm. I don't mind what happens. Can you, Mom, this is impromptu. Can you just sing 2 lines of Kurai Ondrumille?
Okay.
If you want, you can say no. You can say no. That's fine.
That's okay. But I'm just concerned about the audience. They're all.
That's why I just said 2 lines, and
Okay,
after that, just 2 lines, and after that 2 lines, also tell everybody what those 2 lines mean. If you can.
Okay. Let me attempt that. Kurayondrum illai Maraimurthy Kanna Kurayondrum illai Kanna Kurayondrum illai Govinda. Well, let's repeat again. Kurayondrum illai Maraimurthy Kanna Kurayondrum illai Kanna Kurayondrum illai Govinda. So this is almost declaring that I have no deficit. There is nothing deficit. I have it all. That is a declaration to the God, telling Krishna there is no deficiency or deficit in me.
Yeah. And the meaning of the next line, Kannukku theriyama nikkinrai, that what's the meaning of, how does it continue?
Okay. Kannukku theriyamal nikkinrai kanna Kannukku theriyamal ninralum enakku kurayondrum illai. Which is, you are there, Krishna, but I cannot see you. But even though I cannot see you, still I have no deficit. There is a lot of bhakti oozing in this, wherein I cannot see you, yet I don't have anything deficit, but then I can probably sense you and feel you. That is what it is. It's all devotion. That's what is my understanding.
And that last line about this, which is the jnanis are able to say something about you that I can't comprehend. In spite of that, I have no complaint.
Yes, yes, yes. So probably in the Jnana Yoga, that's what is beautifully you're connecting with what we are discussing right now. The Jnanis can see, but then devotion is playing a role here. The Jnanis can probably, yes, do certain things that I cannot, but still I have no complaint. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you sing that line? If you remember.
I don't know where that line is. How does it start? I've got to go through the whole song then.
No problem. Yeah. Sometimes in school, if the teacher asks me a question, I would say, no, I've learned it this way. So you should ask from the beginning. Don't ask me.
And the full song will be a little boring for them, probably.
Yeah, I know, but very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, what in Rajaji's song, no? Mom?
Yes, she is Rajagopalachari. Yes, absolutely.
He penned it, and the most famous rendition, I think, is by MS. So, correct. So and you're right. Meenakshi Sundaram. It is Kure is an interesting word, isn't it? It's complaint. It is also, there's no lack. That's why I think my mom said deficit. There's no lack. Lack means I don't sense a lack. Therefore, there is no complaint. Why there is no deficit? So it's kind of connected words there. So that's the point. So can a person be as serene and complaintless? Complaintless not in terms of sucking it all up, but can a person be of complete self-contentment, self-sustaining contentment, even without understanding exactly what the self is? Drigdrishya viveka, avastatraya, panchakosha viveka. Let me give a 1-hour lecture on how self alone is. Can a person be contented? Yes, by surrendering the ego, surrendering action and the fruits of action to that person as a proxy to what you don't understand. That's the trump card that Krishna talks about. Why yoga of action with jnana, with surrender, is easier and even more superior, because that directly abases the ego. And therefore action is compelling. How we act is our choice. We went all around, Sindhuja. I don't know if that helped.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah. If you want to sing a line or two from Kurukshetra, feel free, Sindhuja. I know you understood the song.
I wouldn't want to.
You wouldn't want
the audience.
Well, let's put it at the timing of the morning. Otherwise, you would have. All right. So, all right. So listen. I was talking about the listening of Shravana a long time ago in Mumbai when I was attending Vedanta class. My teacher was teaching. At that time, I used to finish my office on Tuesday evenings. These classes would take place. No, definitely, Sundar, it's a soul-stirring song. Absolutely. It's a beautiful song. Anyway, so in Bombay, I used to attend Vedanta classes long time ago, around 10 years ago. It used to be Tuesday evening, 6:30. So I used to work late sometimes, but Tuesday evenings, I would try to complete my work wherever I am, if I'm in town, and attend these classes. And it's a lot of hard work going from Lower Parel to Pedder Road and attending these classes and coming back. So I used to go 6:30, listen to the class, come back. There used to be this other guy, I forget his name, but there used to be this other guy who also used to attend regularly. But there was something about this guy. I felt he was like this perfect student, because the traction he used to gain, his understanding of the subject, the same line said can be understood with 20% concentration, 60% concentration, and then 100% concentration, where one line is enough. After that, the next 5 years is repeat mode. Or the concentration can be as such where you're accumulating more and more words and sentences and more chapters and more scriptures. Nothing clicks. So I asked him one day, hey, listen, there's something very enriching about you as a student. I mean, this is just from outside observation, but like, what do you do? I mean, how do you listen to the same topic? I was very curious how others interpret the same topic, how others listen to a master, teacher, guru. He said, Aditya, of course, I mean, he needed time to articulate it because, I mean, the self-help gurus can have an answer to everything immediately. But a person who's truly doing something has not thought of, how do I give a lecture about how I attend the class? So he has to think about it now afresh, right? So he was saying, Aditya, one thing I try to do, with all humility, he said, one thing I try to do is concentrate. That didn't appeal, that didn't convince me too much because it's a very normal word. He said, what is concentrate? Even I'm concentrating, right? I'm not playing some Candy Crush on my phone in the class. I'm also concentrating. He said, no, Aditya, there's a different kind of concentration. Can we, as we listen to a subject, give our complete self in listening? I said, tell me more. He said, often when we listen, we are almost always not listening more than 20-30% of our full concentration. Level one is, of course, if you're listening to this and on your phone and answering a call, cooking food, this, that is one level of distraction, which you can avoid, of course. But beyond that, what is concentration? Yeah, I'm sitting, I'm listening, I'm taking in everything. What more can we do? He said, Aditya, we almost always listen in these three categories. One, we listen to validate. So as we are listening something, we are validating it against what we already know or what we don't know. We are validating against our existing knowledge. Therefore, it's like pouring water in a teacup. You may have 4 liters of water, but you can keep pouring it, but it can only get filled as big as the cup is. So if you're constantly validating against what we know and don't know, whatever Vedanta pours can fill that, what you know, what you don't know, and reinforce what you know and discard what you don't know. So you go out with all sincerity, you go out not too dissimilar. The second thing that stops us from concentrating is for what we don't understand. We have to protect ourselves, isn't it? We can't feel so insignificant that we don't understand something, or, you know, you can't feel evolutionarily we have to protect ourselves mentally. So what we don't understand, we dismiss for a later point or good, but that's not for me. Somebody says, I have chosen the bhakti part. You know, it's you have not chosen. That's all, because that's what the only thing you can understand. So that's the point, is nobody chooses anything. We choose what makes us feel better, what makes us feel good. So I've chosen the jnana path. No jnani ever says I've chosen the jnana path. So there's no path like that. It's only the goal. That's the same for everybody. So that's the second thing that impedes concentration is self-gratification through that lecture. We all want to feel good at the end of something, saying, I've gained 3 things. Can you not gain anything yet say I've concentrated? Anyway, that's second. The third thing that stops us is we often think of application, because that's the only thing worth our time. Right? I mean, if there's no, how can it help me after the class? That's why meditation, mindfulness, all this is so luring in modern world. Because it always is sold as, join this meditation class for peace of mind. Join this meditation class for happiness. Join this asanas class for physical health. But there is very difficult to give a business case for join this class to know the self. I mean, like, doesn't help in any of the. So he said the third reason why we can't listen, though we are listening, why it doesn't deliver, is application orientation. Then I said, nice theory, all this is nice, but teach me how you listen. Tell me more how you listen. He said, if you can we suspend all judgment? Can we suspend all our own vrittis and mental fluctuations? And just in JK style, JK would use these words, but this guy said that, and just attend to what is being said. Is that possible? Just attend to what's being said with complete concentration, which is called dharana, concentration. It's one level below meditative, but dharana is total concentration. Suspending all existing belief, judgment, suspending the need to ask questions, suspending the need for application. Just attend to what is being said with 100% concentration, fully there with every word. Then he said this, it is almost like what is in the teacher's mind or what is in the slide, almost there's a direct transfer into your brain without any internal intermediate processing. It is almost like the penny drops the moment you hear for 100% concentration. It is almost like a pen drive transfer between one brain to the other brain. The contents, the emotion, the knowledge behind that line, everything gets transferred without distortion. And I found truth in that, in what he said. It is our level of concentration with, of course, Shraddha and trust and all of that. You can't make yourself so vulnerable and suspend everything and listen to somebody if you don't have trust, if you don't have, and that is what that blocks us. We don't give in ourselves fully to anything. And therefore, and that's rightly so for evolutionary reasons, because you got to always attend to what if there's a lion in the bushes behind you. You always have to compartmentalize your attention, not given fully to anything. But when it comes to the subject here, with utmost concentration, there can be an instant transfer from mind to mind. And this is not somebody touching somebody, there's a light passing from me. Let's not go into that. We look for miracles always. When Vivekananda was with Ramakrishna, you know this line, the researcher Ramakrishna touches Vivekananda. Till that point, he's a man full of questions and full of skepticism. And there is a transfer between Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. After that, Vivekananda's everything gets quenched. All questions become obliterated. The great Ramakrishna and Vivekananda stories. They are a duo worth reading about if you haven't. But that's not something, we should not always make it all miracles and miraculous. Nothing miraculous about this. This entire concept of miracles and stuff is important. Like, that is, when you expect gurus and gods to perform miracles, it shows how abased of anything we are. We trust a guru who can do miracles. Why should a guru do miracles, sir? Who do we think of as a guru? Somebody who's not like us. Somebody who can be better than us. That's why we want Superman. Superman is only a person who can fly because we can't fly. A Batman is a person who can do things we can't do. A Wonder Woman is a person who some things we can't do. Your person to the left or right is always, they are normal. So in that way, we always look at some self-realized person as a person who can do things with their body, mind, and intellect that we can't do. But sir, body, mind, intellect doesn't need to be any different. So we don't, that's because we're looking for to find the extraordinary in the extraordinary. But the extraordinary is in the ordinary, sir, because body, mind, intellect is the same functionality. You can't expect body to become like a Matrix movie or the mind to like do some teleportation and stuff like that. That's not the mark of a guru. We're insulting a guru when we look for things like miracles. The only thing we remember about Krishna is not the Gita. It's about something he did in the war to make the sun set faster, sunrise faster. That's to the basic mind. So the concentration, as my friend said, can even 5 minutes, it takes a lot of mental energy. You feel drained after that. If you think about it, you feel completely drained, which you should, because when you go to the gym and work out for an hour, you feel drained. You need more minerals, you need more nutrients in your body after that. Why? You feel hungry faster because you've drained yourself physically. So true concentration should bloody drain us mentally. It should feel as tiring as a 1 hour workout. Then you've concentrated. Even a 5-minute intense concentration can drain you mentally. And that is constant. And with that level of concentration, a drop of knowledge can be instantaneous. We've seen that in the life of Nisargadatta, for example. We've seen give 100 examples there. Nisargadatta, I completely surrendered to my guru, the subject. He said, Nisargadatta, you are that self just masquerading in this illusory projection. And you're the Sakshi. Then I believed it. It made sense. And then what? I never went for classes after that. You can still, this is Maharaj stories, a very inspiring story. What I'm talking about is concentration. It is not about the number of times we read something. It's not even about how many classes we attend. It's not even about number of books in our bookshelf. It's about, can we concentrate even for like 5 minutes? You're done for life. If it all depends on the extent of our concentration. Suspending judgment during the concentration, almost as if it's a wireless transfer between the communicator and the person who's communicating. And that's the power of elevation in our knowledge. I said this because it is helping ourselves when we do that. Chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, what we're going to discuss today, is called the Karma Sankhya Yoga. Karma Sankhya Yoga is the yoga of action and renunciation. We've not gone past that topic. So chapter 5 has around 29 slokas. So it's a lovely little chapter, and therefore it's like a good summary of what we understand already from chapter 3 and 4, but doubles down on it. But before we begin with chapter 5 itself, as usual, there's a small intro to karma, and after which we will listen to the slokas of chapter 5, few slokas, the rendition, and then we'll move on. Does anybody have any questions? Excellent. See, we've been talking a lot about the intention, the motive leading to action, action leading to fruits of action, and the fruits of action having a subsequent imprint back on the mind. The middle two is the sthula sharira, which is what you do with the world, the physical nature of the world. Actions and fruits of action are both in the world, isn't it? The manifested world. The left and the right, the activated desire and modification, is what we call sukshma sharira. I'm stopping there in this chart. We're not going to karana sharira and all of that. But this is something we understand, isn't it? Any desire is activated because there is a sense of wanting something to happen a certain way. That is called desire in a very simple term. The way I've put it here is the sense of wanting something to happen a certain way. That's what prompts all action, isn't it? And wanting something to happen a certain way itself is not wrong for us. But we look at the various scenarios that this manifests as. Action is what you do about it. Fruits of action is the results that it accrues for yourself and the world. And modification of the activated desire is what is the mental state it leaves you with. Right? Pretty easy, isn't it? The 4 steps. So let's look at scenario 1. Scenario 1 is what it seems like free will, because I have a desire, I'll act on it. But in reality, it's bondage, because this desire comes not from free choice. Desire comes because of compulsion most of the time. So the first scenario is There's a sense of wanting for something to happen a certain way. It could be bodily, mind, whatever it is. So for scenario one is acting on the desire without any discernment, without asking, where is this desire coming from? Is it for my benefit to act on it? Am I accountable only to my present self, or am I also accountable to a future self for which this action is harmful? All that's discernment. This is not Vedanta discernment. It's a general intelligent people think through this, isn't it? But almost always the intellect is weak, and we may do all those cost benefit analysis in our mind, but we have already decided what we're going to do. That's our story of our lives. Just like in organizations, as a consultant, work with clients who appoint consultants to do a lot of pros and cons, having already decided what they want to do, right? So act on desire without discernment. Why? And that because it's reinforced in the past strong enough. What can a weak intellect do to stop it? So what happens at the level of action? In bondage to that desire, you're pulled by the flow of that water. You have no say in it. However, it feels like free will, because the free will as defined today is choosing freedom in the side of action, which means the moment something comes up in my head, I will act on it. Somebody says something I don't like, I will take offense, right? I have the liberty to take offense. That's free will. So the fruits of these actions are, of course, all actions have a result. The fruits of these actions are almost self-centered results, because it's your desire that gets satiated. We want to acquire and enjoy. What are we doing all this for? We don't ask those questions. So there's always fruits. I'm not saying good results or bad results. They're self-centered results. The modification, what happens as an imprint back into your vasana bank, is that these desires are often modified and often enhanced desire for similar stuff. Again, this scenario doesn't mean only bad stuff. It also means good things we want to do, bad things we want to do, all of it. But the outcome of that is almost modification or greater desire for the similar realm of things. We had a house in the past, then we wanted a bigger house, now we wanted a bigger. So it's a similar things. It's not, I mean, of course, it's nothing right or wrong in those, but I'm saying we stay in the similar realm of what we long for. So the cycle of longing continues. It doesn't stop. So the want is satisfied, the wanting continues, because we have not discerned on the wanting, right? Second scenario is where there is an intellect established. So when there's a sense of wanting something to happen a certain way, which is activated desire, the intellect comes in and doesn't stop action. It tries to channelize small desires into a higher goal, a higher desire. You're cutting down the number of desires into one greater desire. Like the best way we know psychologically is to do away with tamasic bad habits, is to activate in yourself, channelize those desires into, say, desire of being fit, desire of, I need to be there for my children when they are getting old. So I can't, my health is important because I have young children. How many parents say that? Almost all parents, young parents say that, isn't it? I might have done a lot of the wonky stuff when I was younger, but now have more responsibility. I need to be there for my daughter growing up. So let me give away these habits. So there is almost something, you invite a larger desire which eats up a lot of things that you were not able to give up before. So this is where we should all concentrate on, which is not obliterating desire. It's too far-fetched. How do we channelize desire? Can we channelize the lower into the higher? Can we channelize the many into few? Can we channelize desires of the same realm into something higher, which helps us outgrow these multitude of desire? See, the law of desire is that many desires diffused happiness, one desire, ultimate happiness. It's true with material life also. So channelizing desire is to choose a higher goal, and this is not self-realization. The higher goal could be anything. I want to be a CEO by 40, 45, whatever. So how demanding is that? But when you motivate yourself enough with a strong intellect, it takes a lot away from you. You can't do what your friends do. You can't do 4 vacations a year. It's a comparative world out there. You got to meet your targets, exceed your targets, do your networking, be in a good relationship with your organization management. You have to put yourself into some professional courses. You have to work on weekends at times. But all of that comes natural depending on the fire of passion to become that CEO, or even a greater goal, not about becoming a CEO, but truly believing in the work you do, saying, my work in a way alleviates disease in the world from a R&D pharma point of view. So that goal of eradicating polio a few decades ago, isn't it? Or finding cure for cancer, I will channelize everything there. So I go to the lab 6 hours a day on weekends. It doesn't feel tiring for me, because I've channelized that into something bigger that I want to achieve. So these small things like, oh, can I sleep for 1 more hour, doesn't speak to me anymore. Remember, those smaller desires don't evaporate. They evaporate as long as there is a higher desire within which it is melted away. When the higher desire goes, the smaller desire is written. I mean, people who worked in the army and defense with great discipline for 20 years, they can become a drunkard or get into the most tamasic habits post-retirement as well. But 20 years they were in the army, they were so disciplined, yes, but the lower desires, the tamasic nature is there in each of us. As long as it's channelized, it is useful. So this kind of channelizing desire is called rajasic renunciation, meaning you're renouncing lower desires into the higher desire. But you've never outgrown lower desires. You've renounced it into the service of a higher desire. There's also a form of yajna, but we should not kid ourselves that we have perfected something, because things will return. Our minds can be fickle again. But this is a great way to operate in the world. So the action here is that when you channelize desire, this is where the first level of acting by design and not by default comes in. You choose a different action. It's easy for you to say no to that glass of drink because you know you got to get back to office in the morning. Or it's easy for you to say that, sorry, I know there's a cricket match, but I need to hit the gym. You know, it's easy for you to say that the next 5 years of my life, I'm dedicating it to this cause. I'm sorry. It's very difficult to say no or sorry to an invitation. In scenario 1, we just go with the flow like a paper bag in the wind. So in scenario 2, the fruits of action is almost always, as a sovereign guarantee, more fulfilling. Not because of any magic, because channelized fewer desires often give greater fulfillment to diffused many desires. It's the rule of law. It is self-evident, having both face validity as well as seminal validity over time. And what modification happens? Yes, that's also desires. The higher desire is also like a illusory desire, but so there is a greater desire that kicks in. But of course, for doing better things, it helps the world, for example. It helps yourself for the long term instead of giving into all these everyday short-term pleasures. Scenario 3 is where, see, scenario 2 is also running on the treadmill. Then what? Then what? Scenario 3 is the scenario of Karma Yoga. where Krishna says, channelizing desire is good, that's important. We can also purify desire, sanctify desire, good or bad desire. It's not about good desire. From a Karma Yoga's point of view, there is no good, bad. It is about purifying, sanctifying desire. Whatever you feel, whatever you desire, whatever that sense of wanting that something should happen a certain way, don't personalize it. Don't allow it to inflame your ego. Offer that as a yajna to God. Sacrifice, yajna. We have seen so many types of yajna last time. God itself is a proxy for that self that is incomprehensible now. So almost the actions are always benevolent. As you know, you're almost acting as an agent of God. You're almost acting as an agent of God, like Abu Ben Adam did, like many people we know do. It's not some esoteric state. We find these people around us. Act as an agent of God, meaning not become godly. That's not become a God man. That's not what I'm talking about. Agent of God, meaning there is less of you in any action. You're the one performing action, but it's Teflon. It's not, neither action sticks to you. Therefore, results of action don't stick to you. Therefore, this entire process of action doesn't accrue imprints that are going to haunt you in the future. So what are the fruits of action? They're almost always more fulfilling. But the difference in scenario 2 and 3, where both the cases actions are fulfilling, is what happens to the modification of that original desire. In scenario 2, it gives greater desire for better things. In scenario 2, it gives greater peace at all times. Why? Because you've not personalized the results of actions. You've not accruing it unto yourself. You've accrued it unto God. It's a very sophisticated psychological theory, sir. Is it schizophrenia or is it psychosis? Maybe yes, right? Is that some God that you're talking to? But it's not that way. If it's just God, I mean, when I was doing the mental health first responder course a few years ago, the teacher was telling us that physical ailments versus mental ailments. And she was saying how psychosis or schizophrenia, which is the highest level of mental illness, starts with stress and anxiety, etc. Depression, OCD, self-harm, this and this psychosis, schizophrenia. Nothing right or wrong in that, right? But that's what she was saying is a schizophrenia is as impairing mentally as paralysis is physically. See, if somebody has a paralytic attack physically, we can see how damaging it is. Say neck down, somebody can't move. But we don't respect people with mental health problems because we say, oh, that person is wrong. Oh, that person just needs to do something. No, it's as paralytic as a full body paralysis, schizophrenia. So and psychosis, which is just the level down. So she was explaining psychosis as where you actually think of imaginary things or beings and assume that to be real. So you enter the stage called naive reality. You don't understand which is real. The person that you're imagining or the actual person in front of you, both appear real. So the suffering is true for those people. We think they are making it up or they are stupid or mad or whatever, but it's incorrect. The suffering is true. Imagine, the exercise we did, the teacher would ask us two of us to talk just with each other, like, and then she would stand behind my left ear and whisper things in my ear. Aditya, that guy is not good. He's thinking of murdering you. And that gets scary in that exercise because I'm talking to somebody and she's whispering in my ear. And after a while, ma'am, please stop. It's distracting. She said, that's the life of a person with psychosis. That's the life they lead every day. They hear these noises and sounds. So then you get that empathy towards those people. After a point in time, when the heaviness subsided, I asked the teacher a question. Then do religious people suffer psychosis? People who claim to have a personal relationship with like some arbitrary personal god they do puja to, and etc. Not just in Hinduism, in any religion in the world. She said, from a pure definition, yes, you can say that. But psychosis and schizophrenia also is measured from the harm it does to oneself and the people around them. From that point of view, need not. So the true yogi does not believe in God the way you and I were taught to believe in God. A true yogi is still surrendering to what is incomprehensible to him right now. That is the proxy he calls God. The self is very dry, sir. And if it's paroksha for you, which if it's a herd acquired knowledge, not a self-evident aparoksha, self-evident, then it's very terse and dry. But like what me and my mom said about Kureundram, that's beautiful, all perfect. That's loving and that's kind. That's why, Dawood, you're still there? Dawood, tell us some of the names that we use to describe Allah. Ir-Rahman, Ir-Rahim. What does that mean, Dawood?
The magnificent, the beautiful, the most, the best, or it's to describe that he doesn't have, I think he doesn't need anyone to show that he's the best one. So he doesn't have any deficient. That's
Correct. Correct. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim means what? I do it in the name of Allah. Correct?
Yes.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most graceful, the most benevolent, who doesn't need validation, the most alluring. So that is easy to comprehend that, I don't comprehend the true nature of myself that I'm searching for, but I can use a proxy because the true nature is eternal, permanent, nityam. But the God can be all of that as a scaffolding, as a proxy. And so you give into that. That is not psychosis. Because believing in some figure in the clouds, talking to him every day, is a different thing to knowing that there is no person standing with two legs, two hands there. But it is my ignorance of comprehension of the self that I substitute with the all-knowing power that I cannot understand as God. That is not psychosis. that is the stepping stone. So coming back, so the channelizing desire we have talked about. Purifying desire is that I will not allow things to touch me. I am Teflon to both action and fruits of action, non-stick, and greater peace at all times. As you've not personalized action, I don't mind what happens is the outcome of this, because I'm not foregoing action, but I'm not claiming the fruits of action. And the fourth scenario is that which a Jnana Yogi can easily do, which is every desire is a bluff, sir. There's no desire which is not a bluff. That doesn't mean you should not act on desire. You should, body at body level, mind at mind level, intellect at intellect level. But Ramana would ask, where does the desire come from? Ask yourself that, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Even good desire, benevolent desire, or selfish desire, where is it coming from? And you would say the only obvious answer, it's coming from your own mind. Worry for your children, also coming from your own mind. Is there an objective reason? Maybe, but the worry is coming from your own mind. Loss of a loved one, yeah, objectively there's a loss, but the suffering is coming from your own mind. That incessant need to make more, acquire more. Where does that come from? Yes, I have to I need to save enough for my family. All that's a justification, but suffering is coming from here. So yes, where does that desire come from? Call the bluff of it, Ramana would say. Wow, by dispelling ignorance, by understanding your true nature. Then what happens in action? When you call the bluff of something, when you see the illusory nature of something, you're not vested to it anymore. There's no reality in it. Therefore, there's a natural order of BMI, body, mind, intellect established. And therefore, the intellect, mind, and body does its own thing naturally. And the right order is established, so you can fully delegate it. You don't need to, you can witness it, because the intellect is controlling the mind, is controlling the body. So the more fulfilling results and modification, there is nothing to modify, sir. No peace that comes from action, or no peace that comes from fruits. Peace is apart from action or fruits of action. Peace is because you become the truth. So there are 4 scenarios here, and each scenario has a karmic repercussion to it. And if we invite ourselves into scenario 2 first, that's a great step. If we invite ourselves into scenario 3, that's a great step. If we invite ourselves into scenario 4, that's a great step. But scenario 2 is something we can do today. Scenario 2 is something we can do because that requires building an intellect, nothing more. All right. So with that, there's an intro. We'll see some of this in chapter 5. Let's listen to some slokas of chapter 5, and then we'll go through the slokas themselves. Mom, do you want to go through some of the slokas?
Yeah, sure. So this is chapter 5, Yoga of Renunciation. The Krishna Arjuna dialogue continues, and Arjuna, question to Krishna, shloka number 1. Sannyasam karmanam Krishna punaryogam sasamshashe yachhreyayetayor yekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Now sunishchitam, Arjuna is saying this time, please give me a definite answer. So to which Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, shloka number 2. Sannyasah karma yogascha nishreyasakara bhubhau tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo visishyate. Shloka number 5. Krishna gives another insight to the same question. Yat sankhyahi prapyate sthanam tat yogairapi gamyate ekam sankhyam cha yogam cha yaha pashyati sapashyati. Shloka 10, Krishna says how to lead a life. Brahmanya adhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate na sapapena padmapatramivambhasa. Shloka 29 on meditation, how to meditate. Sparshan kritva bahidbakhyam chakshuschayvantare bhruvau pranapanau samau kritva nasabhyantaracharinav. Thank you.
Thank you. The last sloka was 27. Just if somebody is taking notes. Yeah. Let's dive deep into it. Krishna says, Arjuna says in the first sloka, Krishna, you extol the yoga of knowledge, jnana, and the yoga of action. Pray tell me which is better for me. Krishna says, Arjuna, both the paths lead to the supreme. However, yoga of action being easier to practice is superior. But it's the ignorant who think that they give different results. The different paths are depending on where we start, what our starting point is. You know, equity and equality. What's the difference between equity and equality? Anybody? It's a very famous word in the modern DE&I circles, isn't it? What's equity and what's equality? Yeah.
Equity means to give how much is required by people, and equality means to divide equally. So if a poor person needs to be given more resources, then that is the equitable distribution of resources. But equality means to just blindly equally divide the resources among all the people.
Yeah, you're right. So equity, see, equality means both of us have access to the top of the mountain. There's equality. You can't say you're discriminating against me. Both of us can climb to the top of the mountain. But what we don't observe is that I may have a chain tied to my leg. You may not have any chain tied to your leg. So though we say, yeah, both of us are invited to the top of the mountain, we are not starting in equal footing because I have a load tied to my leg. So equity means that I'm given a little more time because of my disability, the load tied to my leg. So while his target is 1 hour, my target is 1 hour, 10 minutes. I'm given, in sport, we say handicap. So in table tennis, we say, when you're playing with a lesser player, start with 0-2. So he has the 2 points handicap, we call it in table tennis. We should probably change that name. 2 points. So we start with 0-2. So now there's equity. It doesn't happen in matches. It happens in friendly games to make it more interesting, right? Otherwise, 10 out of 10 times you can beat that fellow. If you start with 0-4, the match is equity now. Equality means both of us start with 0-0. That's true, but the match becomes boring for the better play. So the two paths, karma and jnana, are the same supreme goal. The top of the mountain is the same, but it is from a sense of equity, because if it's equality, not all of us can be as astute to jnana. So it is a point of equity, Krishna says. It's not different goals. So the famous sloka 5, ya pashyati saha pashyati. He who sees what he sees. The state reached by jnana yogi is the same state reached by karma yogi. He alone who sees them as identical truly sees. Without karma yoga, jnana is difficult to grasp. Whereas a karma yogi who keeps his mind fixed on me, God, reaches Brahman in no time. He who has identified the commonness of the self remains untainted even through performing action. Rest of the chapter we can breeze very fast if we understand this, right? So on the slide you see two columns just with the titles now. Jnana Yogi, Karma Yogi. Krishna would be, it's not a 2x2 graph here. But so let's see there's the only difference between Jnana Yogi and Karma Yogi is Jnana Yogi is a top-down approach. You understand the higher, the lower becomes obvious. There's no intervention required, self-control required. You understand the higher, the lower becomes obvious, isn't it? You understand it's a movie, so it becomes obvious that it's just a movie. But it's not easy for everybody. So for the Jnana Yogi, if you look at the left, it may be a little verbose, apologies for that. Jnana Yogi begins through scriptural knowledge and existing temperament, the sattvic temperament that's pre-existing out of his or her own past imprints. Like Nisarga's example, etc. It's easy for them for the penny to drop. Ya pashyati sa pashyati. They understand, he who sees. What does he see? It is aparoksha, self-evident for that person that I am that self. The self alone is. I am the subject upon which it's the mind's play with karma that produces everything that I experience and see. And what I experience, I cannot be. I am that self alone. Everything else is caused by chitta vritti, which is the fluctuations of my own mind. That when it's unmanifest, it's in my mind. When it's manifest, it's in the world. But none of that is true. Having understood that, a true jnana yogi, not the person just reading the Vedas, that's not a jnana yogi. Jnana yogi is not the person who says, I'm a jnana yogi, so I read Ashtavakra Gita 50,000 times. That's not jnana yogi. A person for whom this is aparoksha, self-evident. a priori. What is that Jnana Yogi? How does he act in the world? See, I've crafted this paragraph very carefully because Jnana Yogi is outside of any opposites. So there is no desire to the self as well once you become the self. So what am I written here? The Jnana Yogi has nothing to gain or lose in this world. They are unattached to both the illusory bondage and the illusory liberation from it. See, if the bondage is, if you call the bluff of bondage as illusory, you can't be attached to being liberated from something that is illusory. That is even more retarded, isn't it? Like the donkey that was tied up, not really, but fake tying up, can only be released with a fake release. So if you've called the bluff of bondage, you have to call the bluff of liberation as well. So everything that we are looking for in these classes, so-called liberation from this void, from wanting, from desire, from ignorance, it's an equal humbug, sir, as the bondage was. So Jnana Yogi calls the bluff of bondage. I am ever free now, today. The self is available now, today. And all of this is Maya, Jagat Mithya. For that person doesn't seek liberation. Because where was their bondage to get liberated from? They have no motive nor lack of it. They don't need to control their motives nor examine their motives because there is no motive when something is a bluff. But there is no lack of motive. They move with the ebbs and flows of the world as well. There is nothing to renounce as there is nothing that is mine anyway to begin with. So all this renunciation is in the path of doing something to get something. But if the self anyway always shines through, you can only renounce something that you possess, sir. You can't renounce something that you don't possess anyway. So a Jnana Yogi's attitude is there is nothing to renounce, as there is nothing mine, nor is there anything that is not mine. A Buddha would say, you are nothing. Advaita would say, you are everything. In either case, there is no possession. There is nothing that is mine for me to renounce. Or there is nothing that is not mine. So in either case, the Jnana Yogi doesn't do anything. In bliss all the time. This highest level of reality in Ashtavakra Gita, chapter 18, verse 83 says, that's for a long time was the screensaver in my phone, when I thought keeping screensavers were a cool thing to do. So Ashtavakra 1883 says, the sage, think of the pedigree, the profundity of this sloka. It's easy to say the sage, wise person desires the self. It's very difficult to say what Ashtavakra says. It says the sage, the true sage, the Jnana Yogi, neither rejects the world nor desires the self. It is counterintuitive to all that we are asking ourselves to do, isn't it? We say Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam. That is not the highest experience of a Jnana Yogi. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam is also programming ourselves to believe in something, isn't it? Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam means you're still saying this is false, this is true, this is false, this is true. Once you've become the self, the sage neither rejects the world. Why? The world is also the self, nor desires the self. What is there to desire? What already is. So, see, if you don't have an apple in your hand, you may desire an apple. If you have an apple in the hand, you already have it. So it's a bad example. He is free of joy and sorrow. He does not live and cannot die. Very hard to understand, isn't it? He does not live. He doesn't live in his body, mind, intellect. He cannot die because he doesn't live in his body, mind, intellect. So that's the stage of Jnana Yogi. Now Krishna says, see Arjuna, if does this make sense to you? No, sir. Okay. Yeah. So don't so easily say I read the Bhagavad Gita, so I'm Jnana Yogi, Arjuna. Karma Yogi is on the right here. If the starting point is there is Shraddha, but the self is incomprehensible to me. That is the part of Gita, and this I don't understand. Aditya, when you speak about Advesha, Sarva Bhutana, all that makes sense to me. When this self-smuggling happens, when you smuggle in this Brahman and Atman, then it doesn't make sense to me. Why? Because it's paroksha. You read it, you understand it, but you've not become it. It's secondary knowledge. How do you know it's secondary knowledge? You have to keep reminding us, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam. That is paroksha. Because you're hearing Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam. You've understood that, but you've not become that as a Jnana Yogi. So therefore, but because I've understood it, I surrender to that knowledge. I know that the world is an illusion, but I still have desires activated in this world. I know that all of this is temporary, but still I'm sucked into it, isn't it? That's the stage many people are in. Let me surrender to this higher knowledge of the self. Let's assign a proxy to it called God. So what do? They offer their actions and the fruits of actions, therefore, to God. Because ego is the opposite to surrender. My actions and my achievements, or my actions and my failures, both are personalizing actions and reactions. But the Karma Yogis offer their actions and its fruits to the self, and if they don't understand the self, to God. So what happens in the yellow box here? Being impersonal, therefore, to both actions and its fruits, and stabilized in their internal surrender, right? Internal surrender, not external, internal surrender. Not about going to 100 temples, not about putting this puja, this, not that. That can also happen, but if it's first started with internal surrender. Internal, that's why, what does Christ say? It's the meek that are closest to me. By meek, not in a bad way, people who have surrendered internally. They become free from the grip of mental fluctuations. Why? It's all offered. It's non-sticky. Even as they act with efficiency in this world. So they are fulfilling their desires, but with a spirit of dispensing those desires, not aggravating those desires, and offered to God. Being in this meditative state, one, over time, they merge with the eternal bliss of the self. Why? Because even that clouds of temperaments, clouds of the mind pass away when it's not accruing any fruits of actions. Instead of petrol in your car, the car still runs, but if you're not adding more petrol fuel to the car automatically stops after a while. And then when Karma Yoga is fully effortless, when it is God that's acting and God that's reaping the results of action, when your ego remains untainted, when your chitta vrittis completely ceases to exist, then what happens? You reach the same destination as a Jnana Yogi begins with, which is itself evident that God alone is, the self alone is. And I am that eternal and complete. Aham Brahmasmi. Mahavakya. Aham Brahmasmi. Right? So so what is Krishna telling in the beginning of chapter 5? Arjuna, it's a fool who thinks that the Jnana Yogi and Karma Yogi are two people chasing two different goals. It is the same goal. Sa pashyati vaha pashyati. Which is, he who sees this alone is seeing properly. Let's continue. 10. Now we're going to go a little fast, because if you're still listening with concentration, think of the remaining of this class where we're going to read through the slokas, not too many, in a meditative spirit, where just hear it for what it is. We're not going to interpret it too much for want of time, but each of it is a gem. This introduction, long, lengthy introductions, are only to make the slokas more meaningful for us as we read them. Even without introductions, the slokas, we are honest, sincere people. We would like these slokas. But the traction from the slokas can be maximized with a lengthy introduction. So let's see what Krishna says this. Now, when we read this, this will become more obvious to us. Krishna says, he who acts offering all actions to God, shaking off attachment, always remains untouched by sin, like a lotus in water. The Karma Yogis perform action only with their senses, body, mind, and intellect, without the feeling of mine in respect of them, and shake off attachment easily. Just a little nudge shakes off the attachment, the possessiveness. As they offer the fruits of action to God, they find everlasting peace. Sorry, the peace is P-E-A-C-E. Other people get tied down. It's a very important slogan. As they offer the fruits of action, I don't mind what happens, because it is not mine to want what happens. I'm an agent. I'm the channel. I'm a vehicle. As I offer fruits of action to God, they find everlasting peace. Other people, what does Krishna mean by other people? The people who say, it's mine, the fruits of actions are mine, good and bad are mine, they get tied down to karma. This tied down is the perfect word to use here. Tied down means you get tied down, bogged down. No fault of yours. You just feel tired in this karmic loop. What is the end goal, sir? It's like a dog chasing a car, isn't it? With chasing. A karma gets modified. That modified karma propels us to act again. That action gives fruits of action. That changes our mental imprints. That again forces us to act. Isn't it tiring? Isn't it tiring to think about it? It's so tiring to think about it. It's, what are we doing all of this for? Attempt to offer actions and fruits of actions to God as we have defined it. And there is a reservoir of peace available for you to dip into the moment you surrender, sir. Surrender not in words. Surrender as in, you don't need to now book a yatra around India. All that can happen later. Surrender internally. The jihad, as we call it, right? The struggle and strife to surrender internally, because you're fighting your own ego there. Otherwise, we are tied down, sir, tied down all the time. People who get tied down think they are free. And they may look at you and think that you are in bondage to something. But that is only what you can see, sir. The inner state is only for each person. Each man is his own judge in how we feel. God determines neither the doings of people nor the fruits of it, meaning the self, the God. The God or self doesn't determine what you do, not even what it accrues. Arjuna, it is nature, Prakriti, not the Purusha. The Prakriti alone that does all of this. The Gunas alone does all of this. But the true knowledge is enveloped by this ignorance. Hence, people fall to delusion. The wise look with equanimity on all, whether it be a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, a cow, an elephant, a dog, there's no gender, sex, type of work, a person doing menial work, none of it. The wise look with equanimity on all, animal, plant, human beings. A more wiser human being the less wise a human being, it is all. The person who professes love to human beings but is unkind to animals cannot be wise. Cannot be wise. A person who professes love for one type of human being and not for other type of human being, by the way they look or by what their choices they make, or simply what religion they're part of, or even more simply, that guy is wise, this guy is a fool. The absolute, the true self is untouched by good or evil and is same to all. A yogi is being established in the absolute and takes ownership of everything there is. Just like who takes accountability for the sinner in your dream, sir? The buck stops with you. It is your mind that projected that sinner. Who takes accountability for that wise man in the dream? The buck stops with you. You take accountability for the wise man in the dream. You are neutral to all. There's a very beautiful, can mark sloka 20 of this chapter, which is a very beautiful summary of the chapter. He who, with firm intellect and free from doubt, rejoices not on obtaining what is pleasant and does not feel perturbed on meeting what is unpleasant, that knower of Brahman lives eternally in identity with Brahman. He who with firm intellect and free from doubt and surrender are opposite. Yajna and doubt is opposite. And he who rejoices not on obtaining what is pleasant and does not feel perturbed on meeting with the unpleasant. In other words, offered both the fruits of action, what is pleasant and unpleasant, to God. That knower of Brahman lives eternally in identity with Brahman. That person who says, I don't mind what happens, lives eternally in identity with Brahman. He whose mind remains unattached derives through meditation the sattvic joy which dwells in the mind, which then through complete identification with Brahman becomes it. All other pleasures are both a source of suffering and have a beginning and end. It is for this reason that a wise man does not indulge in them. The Sankhya Yoga, the oldest yoga, establishes with such firm and succinctness right at the beginning, where it says, the reason why there is no point being overly attached to anything is very simple. It's like a dog chasing a car. Of course, that doesn't mean temporary pleasures are not important. A true Jnana Yogi does not stop himself from anything. Or even a Karma Yogi doesn't need to stop himself from anything, because nothing sticks anyway. So there is no suffering or happiness at the end of supply. All pleasures, what does Sankhya Yoga say? All objects of experience after their shelf life, when the supply stops and the demand remains, source of suffering. And they have a beginning and end. It is for this reason a wise man does not feel the need to indulge in them beyond a point of fault. The last few slokas. He alone, Arjuna, who is able to withstand in this very life before casting off his body the urges of Kama Krodha, is a yogi, and he alone is a happy man. To those wise men who are free from lust and anger, Kama Krodha, who have subdued their mind and have realized God, the Brahman, the abode of eternal peace, is present all around. Who have realized that the God, the Brahman, which is the abode of eternal peace, is present all around. It's not a destination to be reached. It is more of removing the ignorance that's disallowing us to experience that. Last sloka, 29. Krishna says, having known me in reality as the enjoyer of all sacrifices, all austerities, the supreme Lord of the worlds, and the selfless friend of all beings, my devotee attains peace. Again, another sloka to mark. All last slokas in the chapters are beautiful. This is the truth, sir, of Karma Yoga, Having known me in reality as the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, which is the fruits of action. Having known me as the supreme Lord of all the worlds, which is the proxy for what is incomprehensible for us today, the aparoksha. And having known me as the selfless friend of all beings, the law of karma itself, my devotee attains peace. There is nothing vested anymore. You've totally surrendered yourself. Not surrender in a blind way, not surrender to in a manner of psychosis, as we spoke about. Surrender to what? You've not surrendered to anything, actually, anything physical. You've not surrendered to an object. You've not surrendered to a feeling. You've not surrendered to a particular image, but you've surrendered. What does that mean? What have you surrendered to? You actually cannot explain. Why? If you say you've surrendered to God, it can be interpreted in 4 different ways. If you say I've surrendered to this idol, you may have a different equation, but it may mean something else. Truly, you have not surrendered to that piece of wood, nor have you surrendered to a man in the sky. You've surrendered to something only you know what it is. You can experience that surrender. You've surrendered to something, and the thing is taken off, the surrender remains. So that object that you've surrendered for is not what you've surrendered to, actually. Your surrender remains even if that idol is taken away. Because you're surrendered to the proxy of the only reality, the self. With that, let's conclude chapter 5 today. Chapter 5 was Karma Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of action and renunciation, the jnana and karma, where Krishna says, Karma Yoga is easier for us because we have the past propelling us into the future. You can't stagnate that. You got to express that, channelize that, but channelize it not to float into yourself as more ego and attachment. Channelize it to that proxy called God, which is the truth that you can't understand today. So let's please repeat after me. Om Tatsaditi Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Karma Sankhya Yoga Nama Panchamodhyayaha. Thank you all. Have a great week ahead. Reach out should you need anything. Have a good week.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thanks, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
Aditya.